Hello, internet family, YouTubers, out and abouters, Facebookers, biological, extended, step, and every other person that is under the sound of my voice when you get this review. This is Anjanette Potter, also known as Adam's Rib. Um, and this is from Anjanette Speak. This is my review of the 2019 version of The Lion King. So, for my birthday, me and my mother and my daughter's stepchildren decided to go out and see the new version. So my own history with this movie is I saw the original, the one back that came out in 1994. I took my son, who was about 5 or 6 at the time. I think I was probably about 6 months pregnant with my daughter. Anyway, we wound up going to see it. He wound up owning a copy of the film as well as the soundtrack album. So some history on The Lion King. My kids watched the Timon and Pumbaa cartoons that came on a regular basis. So if you know anything about the history of The Lion King, then you know that there was a entire franchise created around this film. So that's just how popular this film became. With the 1990 version, it was the fifth film made during the Disney Renaissance period. That would be the years between 1989 and 1999. And during that time, Disney made a few films that were based on well-known stories that also that became very successful. This is also where we kind of got the Disney princesses from. During that time, they made Aladdin, The Lion King, Beauty and the Beast, Tarzan, and I'll have slides up on my blog and also on my YouTube of the different films that were a part of the Disney Renaissance, so that you can see exactly what I'm talking about. But during that time period, they made quite a few films, and The Lion King wound up being one of the more successful ones. So the original songs for the 1994 film were written by Sir Elton John and Tim Rice. The film score was done by Hans Zimmer. I believe Hans Zimmer was the guy who did the Miami Vice, worked on Miami Vice, but he has quite a few. If you want to do research on him, you already know about Elton John. But if you want to do research on Tim Rice and Hans Zimmer, they both have a pretty good history with doing film scores, TV scores, and that type of work. So James, just like in this one, James Earl Jones was the voice of Mufasa. Jonathan Taylor Thomas from Home Improvement was the speaking voice of young Simba. Jason Weaver, who you know from the Jackson 5 TV miniseries biopic, as playing Michael, did the singing voice for young Simba. Matthew Broderick, who goes down his history as Ferris Bueller, was the voice of grown Simba, and Joseph Williams was grown Simba's singing voice. Now, Joseph Williams, I remember Joseph Williams from Star Search. It's the same guy I'm thinking about, but he eventually I did my research on him, and his father is actually John Williams, who, if you or about my age group, you remember the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. He was responsible for um, he worked on that as well as the Star Wars um, movies and everything. So Joseph Williams eventually became the lead singer for the group Toto, and he was with them for a little. He was with them for a little while. Um, anyway, Maura Kelly um, was the voice of Nala, and Sally Dworsky was her singing voice. Nikita Kulame was the voice of young Nala, and Laura Williams was her singing voice as a young lady. And Madge Sinclair, who is no longer with us, so one of my favorite actresses of the 70s, was the voice of Sarabi, Simba's mother. Um, the original in the 1994, the hyenas were played by Whoopi Goldberg, Cheech Marin of Cheech and Chong fame, and Jim Cummings. I'm not real familiar with Jim Cummings, and I forgot to look up anything on him. But yeah, if you see the original, Whoopi's hilarious as one of the hyenas. She really cracked me up. So Robert Guillaume of Benson was the voice of Rafiki, and Nathan Lane and Ernie Sabala, which Nathan Lane's one of my favorite actors, were the voice of Timon and Pumbaa. So, and I think they went on to be Timon and Pumbaa even in the series. And Rowan Atkinson was Sazu, the little bird that everybody kept making fun of. So the original film grossed a total of $968 million. They were the 35th high-grossing film of all time, the third highest grossing film for Disney Studios, the seventh highest grossing animated film of all time worldwide. And it set other records as well. So if you want to look it up in Wikipedia, I know some of you have mixed feelings about Wikipedia, but I believe that their information is pretty accurate. So that was information on the original 1994 version. Now, as you can see, those are some pretty big shoes to fill, because this movie went on to not only how can I say this? Not only spawn sequels, which we owned a copy of the sequel as well. It also became a Broadway show. They had toys out. It even became a game for, I think, Super Mario Brothers and Xbox and all that. Some of the gaming systems even had it as a game. So this film, like I said before, this film just went, and I think most of the films from the Disney Renaissance period, as they're now calling it, pretty much did the same, but this one was one of the more famous ones. And so, like I said before, those are some pretty strong shoes to fill. And I think the Broadway musical came like quite a few years later. So we're not even talking about something that happened like right after. We're talking about something that came along like much later. Maybe even maybe even a decade later. I'd have to look that information up. But so this movie knocked everything out of the box. Now the second one isn't any slouch. The 2019 version, Donald Glover is the voice of grown Simba, with J.D. McQuarrie as young Simba. So because Donald Glover is musically gifted, there was no need for anybody to be his singing voice, as far as I know anyway. The James Earl Jones, like I said before, returns as Mufasa. Beyonce Knowles Carter as grown Nala. Shahadi Wright Joseph as young Nala. She also played young Nala in the Broadway version. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar with her, she, I think, played the teenage daughter in the film Us. So she has a pretty extensive career. Alfre Woodard, also another one of my favorite actresses from back in the day, came back as, was the voice of Sarabi, who is Simba's mama. Seth Rogen was Pumbaa in this one. Chiwetel Ejiofor played Scar. And if you're not familiar with him, he's the guy who played Petey Green's manager in the film Talk to Me. So he's playing Scar, and Billy Eichner is Timon. John Caney, I don't know who exactly that is Rafiki in this film, and John Oliver is Sazu. So the budget for this film was $260 million as of today, which would be the 22nd of July, early Monday morning, because I'm doing this off hours. The box office so far has been $531 million. So they pretty much it's pretty much already doubled. It's already making a profit. There's a Broadway the director who decided to work on this film drew a lot of his inspiration from the Broadway version and decided to call it he drew his inspiration from the Broadway version when it comes to the two characters of Nala and Sarabi, which, if you see it, Nala and Sarabi's parts are a little bit bigger in this film than I remember them being in the original 1994. So they describe it not as live action, but actually photorealistic computer generated animation, which would make sense because live action, of course, you don't see lions talking talking in English and all the other stuff, so that would make a little bit of sense. So some of the general themes that were present in both, the class warfare between the lions and hyenas. There was also a little bit of classism mentioned with Timon and Pumbaa. If you remember, Timon and Pumbaa don't really prey. Well, I guess they do prey on somebody. They prey on the grubs or whatever, the little bugs that are in the trees and everything. So I guess there is a little bit of survivor there, but I don't think they consider it to be preying. Mostly everybody in the jungle is scared of the lions. So the lions are considered to be kind of like they pretty much run things. And so the other animals tend to be their prey along with hyenas. And I never thought about it, but I kind of looked up a little information because I'm like, well, are lions or hyenas really natural enemies like that? But I guess they are. They prey on some of the same animals, but hyenas tend to be more scavengers, so they will come behind where, another animal such as the lions have already, preyed on an animal or already, ate, good. And once they're leftovers, the hyenas will come and kind of come on those. And so I was like, oh, okay. Anyway, another theme is loss because of Mufasa's death and how it affects the pride on Pride Rock. A lot of things. It's not really just the loss of Mufasa, also the loss of Simba, because the pride thinks that they not only did they lose their king, but they lost their future king, because in their minds he's deceased. If you know anything about the plot of the film, Scar also thinks that he's deceased because he originally sent the hyenas after him to killing. So that brings me to grief, Simba's reaction to Mufasa's death, and not only the Mufasa's death, because at the time that Mufasa was killed, Simba was just a child. And so his uncle quite easily was able to manipulate him and make him think that he was responsible and killed Mufasa, when really it wasn't Simba who killed Mufasa, it was his uncle. So now we come to our next two themes, which is greed and covetousness. Scar's desire for Mufasa's throne, and in this version, we also recognize he wants Mufasa's woman, Sarabi, Simba's mother. There's hints of him trying to get her to get with him in this particular one that wasn't present with the first one. But at the same time, if you're an adult and you're looking at this, you kind of do wonder, well, since she's head, she's kind of the head lioness, wouldn't Mufasa be trying wouldn't Scar be trying something there? So Scar is the brother of Mufasa, Simba's uncle, and kind of a family outcast. He just seems a little bitter. He never seems to amount to too much, and just never seems to get his act together. So now another theme is spirituality, which I thought was a really consistent theme through this. Rafiki, I can't remember if he's a baboon. No, he's not a baboon. He's a monkey. The monkey family pretty much acts as their shaman or spiritual aid or guide, and he aids in Simba's reconnection to his position as king. He kind of ministers to him and puts him in touch with his father. He aids in Simba's ability to hear from Mufasa from beyond the grave, and seeks guidance to return to Pride Rock. So at one point in the film, he says, well, when can I see my father? And so he shows him his reflection in this body of water, and he says, well, he can't understand. He's like, well, that's me. And he says, look closer. He said, your father is in you. So there's, anything about African spirituality or certain aspects of African spirituality, they believe in the, consulting the ancestors and thinking about what the ancestors would want for them to do, and different, that's where a lot of the guidance comes from. So big parts of the film have to do with that type of spirituality. So Mufasa, it also focuses in the beginning. You see Mufasa teaching Simba about the great kings before them. How if you want an example of how to lead, then you want to go consult the kings, which is also the ancestors before them, and how to seek wisdom from them. You also, another theme you see is the importance of solid parenting, both male and female. Mufasa wasn't just a very strong authoritarian. There's different types of leadership when it comes to there's authoritarian and authoritative. So authoritarian is the strong parent that basically is sort of very controlling. Authoritative is you still have a sense of that parent being in charge, but there's allowance. There's still a strict code of obedience. He wants him to listen to him, and if you see this film, I don't want to give too much of it away. You start to see why there's such a strong emphasis on obeying his father, because obeying his father keeps him, disobeying his father gets him into trouble. So, but he also wasn't just a strong father figure. He was also very playful. He didn't have a problem playing with Simba and having a sense of humor. He wasn't stern all the time. To me, he demonstrated a little bit of what I call paraclete parenting. So paraclete parenting is mostly, the word paraclete in Christianity is mostly associated with the Holy Spirit. And we call him the paraclete because he comes alongside and he helps to teach and aid you. And so he didn't just, he just wasn't about disciplining Simba. He also, in fact, he spent more time teaching Simba than he did disciplining. Now, if he also, it wasn't, he had a firm hand, but he was also very instructive. So something to think about. We also see him teaching Simba about the circle of life, how all living things are, the way that all living things are connected to one another. Also, if you think about things in their hierarchy, also kind of the animal food chain. So the cultural significance of lions, because I always thought about, well, why the Lion King? Well, we know lions are considered amongst the animal hierarchy to be the king. They've always been considered the king of the jungle. Different religions reference lions, and Christianity is no different. We call Jesus the Lion of the tribe of Judah. So lions are symbolic of strength, strategic thinkers, skilled, organized hunters. They're symbolic of deity in many cultures, and they're considered the king of other animals. So, in this movie, it's no different. They are presented to us as basically being the top of the animal hierarchy in the setting that they're in. So now we can come to my review. I was excited about Beyonce being cast as Nala. I could totally see that. Even though there are some people that are Beyonce haters, I'm not one of them. I'm sort of a semi-beehiver and everything. I won't go. I'm not one of these people that'll go in somebody's mentions and tear them apart. At the same time, I've been a fan of her music since Destiny's Child, and I feel like I've watched her grow up and grow into the young lady that she is. And so I was pretty excited about her being Nala. I was especially excited about seeing the film after I saw her video, Spirit, which is basically paying homage to Africa and celebrating the African culture and everything. So I was really excited after. I'm like, well, I'm really excited to see this now that I've seen this video. Because I saw the 1994 version and owned a copy, the element of surprise really wasn't there for me, but I still enjoyed the film. We saw the 3D version, which I highly recommend that you see, especially because of the quote live action, which really is because of the form of computer generated animation. I highly recommend that you see the 3D version with the glasses and everything. I think it brings an element to it. You feel like you're there, especially during the stampede scene. When you're seeing the stampede scene, it's almost like you feel like you're almost about to be stampeded yourself. So I vouch very heavily for recommend seeing that. And if you're got kids that you want to take, I highly recommend taking them and letting them see the 3D. The grandchildren really, really liked it. They didn't budge once during it. They were really into it. So some additions, I feel like I said earlier, I think that Nala and Sarabi both had like bigger speaking parts in this one. Timon and Pumbaa were allowed to elaborate on their viewpoint of the class struggle when Simba's reminiscing about his father before his death, and he talks about, well, I don't think, and Timon and Pumbaa kind of go, well, I don't think it's a circle, it's more like a line. And they kind of let you know where they feel like they stand on that line, which is kind of the bottom of the barrel. because every other animal is kind of feasting on another animal, and they're left with grubs. So I'll allow you to make your own conclusions on that. Now I remember, on the touching on the subject of class, I remember with the 1994 version there was a little bit of controversy. Um, it was not without controversy like most famous films. One was someone felt like the film was heavily borrowed from Japan. I think it was Japanese anime. You'd have to look that up. I don't have that information with me right now. But the other was some people felt like the hyenas represented African Americans in this country. And so something that you can also do the rabbit trail on. I won't elaborate too much. The showdown between Sarabi and Shenzi, the female hyena, the head hyena, was a bit of an addition, and this happened during the fight scene between the lions and the hyenas. But however, I don't want, like I said before, I don't want to give away too much of this film, but I will say that I highly recommend that you see it. If you saw the 1994 one and you own a copy, I wouldn't expect too many. I don't think there are going to be too many surprises. They stuck really close to the script on this one. So there really isn't a whole lot that they did that was real different. However, if you take your kids to see it, as I said before, I highly recommend that you see the 3D version. It doesn't, and it really doesn't cost any extra. It's just a different theater than the regular HD. But I would highly recommend seeing it in 3D because of the whole. We also saw Aladdin in the 3D version with the Will Smith version, and I highly recommend if you go see this one. And I think they're doing one with Toy Story pretty soon. It's going to be released pretty soon. I would recommend if you go see these redos that you see them in 3D. I think you'll enjoy it a lot better because of the visualization and everything. Anyway, this is my review. I don't have nothing bad to say about this movie. Like I said before, if you didn't see the original, then I would highly recommend taking your children and seeing the 3D version. So that's about 3 or 4 plugs for the 3D version, but I would highly recommend going to see the 3D version. If you saw the original and you decide to go ahead and take the grandkids, or go take some other children that or just want to take yourself because you feel like getting out, just don't expect too many additions or anything to the script. However, I will say, because the original was an exceptionally good movie, you probably still won't be, like I said, you won't be underwhelmed, but you won't be overwhelmed either, because it's not that much different, except you're just seeing it with very realistic looking animals that look like the actual animal. So anyway, this is Adam's Ribs signing off. You'll probably hear from me a couple more times this week and everything, because I have a few more subjects to podcast on anyway. So this review will be available on my Anchor podcast that I do every week. It will also be available on my Out and About blog, my live music venue entertainment blog. It'll also be available on my YouTube channel. So I will talk to you guys later. I love you, and have a blessed week. Bye-bye.